All right, I'm going to get started. Talk about the politics dissad, which I'm always asked to do. I think this is like the 50th time I've given a version of this lecture over the years. I'm going to start off with how to pick your dissad. I'm going to go through some other stuff. At the end, I'll go through answering it. If I have time, I'll go through researching it. So the most important thing about the politics dissad is to make sure you're reading the right dissad. Often teams will do things like, read a dumb dissad, lose lots of debates, so they'll just miss out on what's most important. So first and foremost, and this is a question we're asking ourselves now, is the link debate. Certain apps will always just go a certain way. You've got to win that. In my mind, you need to win it's unpopular, or you need to get another dissad. In other words, the quintessential question you ask yourself in this topic is, can I win that the apps are unpopular? And I will respond with a resounding absolutely. The Cuba app, incredibly unpopular. We've been mean to them since the 60s. They are dirty communists. We hate them for a reason. Heck, even the Cuban people hate the Cuban government, which makes it incredibly unpopular to do things with them. Venezuela. Yeah, obviously, they're best friends with Iran. We don't really want to interact with them. And Mexico. Are you kidding? Nothing pisses off half of Congress more than giving Mexico a bunch of more assistance. How dare they need our help? They should have figured it out by now. In other words, we've been ignoring Latin America since 1987 for a reason, and that reason is everyone in Congress would prefer that we not waste our time and money on them. Which means I think that this question is moot on this topic. Yes, the plans are unpopular. Second, so I figured that out. Everything on the topic will be an unpopular action. Uniqueness. This is a decision based on the literature. What does the literature, and by that I mean the world of Congress and the way it's covered, say about what will pass? If you're talking about something being unpopular, you have to win that the status quo is going to do something good. Congress will accomplish something good. The plan is unpopular enough to address it. Oh man, immigration's such a great dissad. I don't know the answer to that until I've read the uniqueness on the debate, until I've looked at the news feed and figured it out. If you just assume that that's going to be the dissad without letting the literature determine the dissad, you're doing yourself a disservice. The major difference between high school and college tournaments is that in college tournaments, almost everyone is reading the exact same politics dissad. Many times with the exact same uniqueness card in the 1NC. It's actually unbelievable, the sheer coincidence of that. And it's because so many people have been researching politics dissad for so long that a card will come out and they're like, oh my God, this is the DA this weekend. And then sure enough, round one, everyone's reading the exact same card because they let the literature determine the dissad. Third, once you've chosen which dissad you have, and I've already given you hints that it should be something as unpopular, the link should be as unpopular, and you have uniqueness, you need two impact scenarios. First, an external and one an internal for any good politics dissad. I say external because this is the reason the politics dissad is popular. They're talking about Mexico. Let's change the subject completely and talk about Congress. They don't naturally interact that easily for the affirmative, so you usually have an impact to something they can't easily access. Example, on last year's college topic which was energy. The politics dissad was immigration. Energy doesn't very easily access immigration. That makes it great. It gives it an external impact, something that you can weigh and do all of the impact calculus that Stephen talked about. Internal means the exact opposite. It means you have an impact that is going to access a lot of the affirmative's impacts as well. That's what makes a good DA. Examples of classics of this are economic growth, leadership, anything that says this impact stabilizes the world or can solve lots of scenarios. Fourth, if you debate in a place where there's lots of critique apps, instead of reading the exact same politics DA, you should have one based on the impact. So you should ignore everything I said about uniqueness and pick a politics dissad that you can just defend versus a critique team. Why not? They're not reading the K app because they want to beat you on non-uniqueness. They're reading the K app because they want to beat you on your impact is bad, here's our critique of it. So instead of saying, oh, can we win uniqueness? Yes, you can. Just make sure that you can beat the critique with the impact. So those are the ways you pick your dissad. The second thing then, now that I've picked it, is how do I put together a really good 1NC? I'm going to start backwards here. I'm going to start with number 3. The earlier you can read an external impact, the better your disad is going to be. The earlier you can establish here's the big terminal impact that's unrelated to the aft, because come to in our time, you want to talk about how this impact outweighs the affirmative. The internal, or the turns the case argument, is not as necessary in the 1NC. I will say, if you have time, if you're ever putting together one of those 1NCs and you're like, man, what else are we going to read? Why not throw out additional impacts to your disads, whether it's politics or not? It's always a good use of time. 2, your 1NC shell for the politics disad should have a blank space where the link should go. The card that's talking about the aft. You want it to be as specific to what the plan text does as possible. 2 reasons. First, it prevents the link turns from mattering. If your link card says, giving economic aid to other countries is unpopular, you will probably lose to, yeah, but Cuba is popular. Haha. Second, you won't help with a net benefit to the counterplan. What does the counterplan do? What does the plan do? You can draw yourself a little Venn diagram. You want a link card that's about the difference between the plan and the counterplan. I'll say that again. You want a link card that's about the difference between the plan and the counterplan. If someone is reading a Cuba act that lifts the embargo, and you counterplan to allow travel to Cuba, your link card should not be interacting with Cuba is ridiculously unpopular. That's silly. Your link card should be the embargo in its entirety, unpopular, and then have another card that says travel. Oh, that's a little bit different. So that difference is good. Before you read your 1NC, make sure that the link card is as specific as possible. Finally, for the 1NC, you want a uniqueness card that tells a story. You want a piece of evidence that says it will pass and mentions the president's involvement as a critical component in ensuring passage. You want a piece of uniqueness evidence that cites the president's involvement. Absent Obama, this wouldn't pass. I like disads with one big card that says it's going to pass now, it's got the votes, by the way, Obama's important. It just sort of adds a lot of credibility to the disad in its entirety. That's as opposed to a card that's like, it's going to pass. Next card. Obama's really important. If you can find one card that does both of those, just make that card your 1NC, even if you have slightly better cards elsewhere. It starts telling the story. Okay, now for the bulk of it. Almost everything I will say is not just about the politics disad, it's about all disads, and to be honest, all offensive arguments for the negative. First, you want to start off with an overview. You want to give me an overview of the disad. This does not mean that I want you to explain the story. I'm not looking for the old school, like, right now our uniqueness is saying that the bill is going to pass because it has all of the votes, but the plan is really unpopular. No, I don't need that. This isn't a 5-paragraph essay theme that you're writing for your English teacher. This is an argument. Instead, do impact the external arguments. The external impact arguments. You would want to, in the overview, read terminal impact cards wherever possible. I've listed 3 of my favorite here. The Ox card is an impact of bioterrorism. Instead of saying, bioterrorism will kill everyone, it actually says bioterrorism would probably cause extinction. Nuclear war, certainly not. That's a piece of impact evidence that does calculus for you. It's like bioterrorism, much worse than nuclear war. Bostrom is a very famous card. Does anybody know what subject it's on? Yeah.
10 to the 31st.
No, wrong. Anybody? Subject, Bostrom card? It's just a card that says the United States and Russia are the only 2 countries who could end the world with a war. It's like, the card even includes the phrases like, unlike a small nuclear conflict, such as one between India and Pakistan, or the United States and China, U.S. and Russia is truly planetary existential. And finally, there's this one card that I forget the author to, but I wrote down that it's like a 1% risk of warming is worse than a guaranteed risk of nuclear conflict, because warming is doing the same damage on a longer, more irreversible scale. It's a really good card. In your overview to your politics disad is where you want to read evidence that does impact calculus for you. Third, This is where you want to introduce your impact to access as much as possible. This is what we call internal impacts. The politics disad accesses and solves this advantage. It solves this advantage. If you don't have evidence on this, this is something you want to start establishing analytically for your disads. You begin to weigh things. If you're worried about winning an impact, and only if you're worried about reading an impact, you can always be like, and new impact to our disad. Found out that Mr. Applecop has banned the Chattahoochee kids from reading impact turns in the 1AR, so I would read all the new impacts that I have in the negative block every single time, because they're not going to impact turn them, they're not allowed to. They're prohibited from doing it. Morgan Choi, next time you debate them, just literally read every impact you have. They can't impact turn them. What a bunch of idiots. External impacts are great. What? Chattahoochee High School. New impact. Do not read something unless that impact turning is possible or probable. You would not want to normally, with the disad, introduce like, oh, and by the way, economic growth is really good. So that's a good way for them to start a debate about DDAB or economic growth bad. Don't want to start a debate that's like, oh yeah, by the way, warming is bad in the block. Most everyone will say warming is good, ice age, stuff like that. Choose carefully. A couple of ideas if you're looking for things that people don't impact turn. Diseases, terrorism. Those are probably your two safest. But just things that you're like, could anyone say this is good and totally ruin this debate for us? If yes, don't read it. Second part of the 2 and C, the 1 and R, is uniqueness. You absolutely have to win it. I try to explain something. I encourage you to ask your lab leaders or anyone else about this argument. Politics is popular because the uniqueness is absolute. If a bill in the Senate has 51 votes, it has the exact same outcome as a bill that has 100 votes. Why is that? It passes. The bill comes into effect regardless of the margin of the vote. Which means when we're talking about politics disads, if it has the votes, it will come into effect. We know this. If it goes below the line where it has the votes, 49 is so much worse than 51, and 100 is no better than 51. Which means that there's an absolute line. This distinguishes it from almost every other sort of impact DA. If we're talking about a relations disad, is there a line where relations go from good to, oh my God, war? No. When we're talking about the economy, is there a line where the economy goes from lots of growth to no war? There's no line like that. The line is so nice. That's why you'll see people say things like, we control uniqueness. That's a phrase that says that if we win uniqueness, we win that in the status quo we know the outcome of the bill. Here's the way to win uniqueness for the politics dissent. First and foremost, you should focus your time and your explanation on evidence that cites Obama's capital, his investment, his ability to persuade votes as the reason it will pass first. Before you begin, will it pass, won't it pass? You want to engage in arguments that are, as long as the president has the ability to persuade people, this bill will get passed. Oh, their evidence says that Republicans are furious and they're not going to get on board. Our cards say, as long as Obama's got the capital that he can invest, he's going to get enough votes on board to pass. It's predictive, use that phrase, predictive, and it suggests where the vote will be if the president can remain persuasive. Third, a lot of people think that their job is to read as many cards on an issue as possible. I'm here to tell you that that is not what debate is about. Your job is to win arguments, which means reading 12 cards that all say the same thing. It will pass because the election was really bad for the Republicans and they all really want immigration to pass now. All 12 cards say that. You've actually only made one argument. You just have 12 pieces of support for it. If they read one card that's like, despite the fact that the election was bad for Republicans, There's a bunch of people who don't care because they don't need Hispanic votes to win, so they're not going to get on board with the bill. That's why it won't pass. You're well behind in this uniqueness debate, even if it's 12-1. Instead, focus on a diversity of warrants or reasons. What are the multiple reasons it won't pass? And think about this when debating in the 2 and C and the 1 and R. We're winning uniqueness for A and B and C. And A and B and C are the reasons it will pass. Read the AF's evidence. I don't know why I used we, other than this is an older version of this. But read the affirmative's evidence. Figure out why it says it won't pass. Instead of saying, hey, we have uniqueness cards, say, their evidence says it won't pass for this reason. We have answers, they are this. This is the major reason I've always been a proponent of the major offensive argument going in the 1 and R. I'll say it again. The major offensive argument going in the 1 and R. The 1 and R has a lot more time to read the affirmative's evidence, actually prepare out answers, respond to the evidence. If you are a 2 and C, you don't have time to read all of the cards on all of the issues. Why not devolve that stuff to your 1N? Finally, handle uniqueness overwhelms the link well. This means knowing your judge. If your judge likes the politics dissad, like me, you can usually answer uniqueness overwhelms the link with, no it doesn't, we have a link. I'll talk about what this means when I get to the apps section. But for the record, conceding uniqueness doesn't gain you anything. All it does is put pressure on you to beat the link. When you are negative, you want to say they've conceded our uniqueness. That just means we have to win a link. When you're affirmative, you will say we're conceding uniqueness means that the link is not possible. Uniqueness overwhelms the link. If that's drawing a blank for anyone, start, circle it, feel free to ask some people about it. Look for and lie about these 3 warrants for uniqueness evidence. Vote count. A vote count is usually done by Senate insiders, like aides and assistants that people have, or there'll be a quote that pops up. It's like, we got an inside vote count. Anyone seen the TV show Ace of Cards? It's on Netflix. Anyone? Good. It's too adult for you all. Don't watch it. It's about the House, and there's this big board that the majority whip has up in his office, played by Kevin Spacey, and I love it. He's got a little name card for every single member of the House, and they're talking about it. He's like, yes, yes, no, maybe, yes. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. He's actually doing a vote count. Talk about having a vote count, because if your evidence actually says, like, it has 61 votes, that seems to speak with some authority. I mean, people in the newspapers don't just throw out 61 without having some, like, solid foundation for that. Second is momentum. I talked about this with Obama a little bit, like the snowball effect. When I first introduce a bill, if I'm in the House and I'm like, I want to pass this bill, on the day I introduce it, it only has 1 vote. Because I've introduced it. Other people haven't read it. It may have some natural allies. Let's say that everyone that I'm best friends with, I know I'm going to vote. So, all right, I have 9 good friends. It's up to 10 votes. Does that mean it's not going to pass? Yes. No. There's a whole lot that happens between the introduction of the bill and the final vote of the bill. And everything that happens is called the momentum. Third is insiders. If you can qualify why the person reading your uniqueness, writing your uniqueness evidence is more qualified to talk about stuff, the better you'll be. Link debate. Read new link evidence and new link arguments if necessary. This is a better idea if you want to go for politics versus the case. If you're going for politics as a net benefit to a counterplan, you just want the link to be about the difference. If you're going for politics versus the AF, so like status quo outweighs the affirmative, then, it makes some sense to read some new link arguments, develop that a little bit. Read link uniqueness to go your way. There are 2 types of uniqueness. There's impact uniqueness, which says the impact won't happen now. And then there's link uniqueness, which says that the link will not be triggered now. For example, impact uniqueness for an economy DA would be the economy is fine now. Link uniqueness for an economy DA would be nothing's going to screw up the economy anytime soon. For the politics dissad, impact uniqueness would be the immigration bill will pass now. Link uniqueness would be Obama has plenty of capital. No fights are coming now. No big issues are going to be distracting. That sort of stuff. That helps set up the story. Third, read old school theory cards to indict their link. There's a theory called winners win and winners lose. You need to know what those mean. Winners win is a theory originally coined by a guy named Norm Ornstein, O-R-N-S-T-E-I-N. It said that politicians, particularly the presidents, when they win, they tend to win some more. He used the analogy of a lion tamer. Supposedly, if you're taming lions, it's really dumb to put them all in the room and try to tame them all together. But instead, if you pick one big lion and tame it, and then put all the other lions in, all the other lions are going to fall in line because they see what the big lion is doing, and they're like, oh, this big lion must know something we don't, so let's all jump in line here. That's sort of the theory of winners win with the president. He gets something done, then all of a sudden everyone else is in fear of him and begins to do what he, or hopefully one day she, does and falls in line and that sort of stuff. Winners win, winners lose is the opposite. Winners lose is when a president gets something done, he then has a harder time getting other things done because capital is finite. You can't add to it. It only diminishes. It diminishes when we do certain things. We can get more, but when we spend it, it's gone forever. This is a banker's theory of political capital. If they say link turn, you should read a card that's like from a professor of presidential studies that's like, winners only lose. You can't gain capital when you do stuff. You only lose it. Here's our card from this professor at Georgetown who's been studying the president since he was 12. He's 172 now. He has so much knowledge on this issue. It's unbelievable. Far better than their newsfeed stuff. Finally, explain why their link turns don't apply to your scenario. Just because a plan is popular doesn't mean it's A, popular with the right people, B, popular enough to overwhelm the ways it's unpopular. I wrote an article in the Rostrum not too long ago that was about how just because something is popular doesn't mean it's not also unpopular. All decisions have winners and losers. Does that make sense? If I pass a bill that gives the state of Georgia $5 million, is that bill popular or unpopular?
Unpopular. With other states, maybe.
Both.
Can it be both? Depends on who you ask. Agreed?
Yeah.
So the important question then is, how important are the people from Georgia and what I need to get done? If the people from Georgia are important, then it's a popular act. If everyone else, that's probably not true. There's probably some people in Georgia like, quit wasting federal money. Okay. There are a lot of theory arguments that people make about politics disads. I'm going to talk about those at the bottom because they're all affirmative answers. But I want to tell you how to answer theory arguments that people read against all disads. First, you should have blocks that are short and to the point. You should write them yourself. Then you should highlight them down. Answers to things like intrinsicness and vote no, and fiat means we don't have to answer the politics dissad. All of these arguments can be answered with politics dissads are good. If anyone reads a theory argument and the conclusion of that theory argument is you don't get to say the thing you want to say, the first thing you have to do to defend it is, wait a minute, what we're saying is really valuable. It has merit. When teams say, no, wrong forum, you don't get to read critiques. Critique teams respond with, wait a minute, the critique is really good. It's really valuable. Here's all of our evidence in support of that. You should do the same thing with a politics dissent. Intrinsicness. I like to call this the two separate schools of thought. This may not speak to you all as much as it does to me, but the Wake Forest school and then the Michigan State school. The Wake Forest school are people who think that intrinsicness has a lot of value. Will Moseley Jensen falls into this school of thought. Kind of believes that, we should act logically, because logically, that's the best thing to do. Those people like these theory arguments. The other end of the spectrum, we have the Michigan State school. That school thinks that all of these arguments are totally dumb. The debate should just be cards, and we should read them out, da-da-da-da. That's a good way of deciding, just sort of like, oh man, who do you agree with? Who do they fall in line with? The more you know, if you can ask your judge when you go to these tournaments, or if you could figure out sort of what school. I will say this, I think most people think that these theory arguments are pretty bad, and that a strong defense of the politics dissed and a strong defense of your link is good. Vote no is probably the silly popular one. Have you all heard that one? Does that pop up any? Vote no is just the argument that says that the judge is like a member of Congress, and when the plan was read, it was the equivalent to it being presented on the floor. Voting against a bill is just as unpopular as voting for a bill, so the loss of capital and controversy is inevitable no matter which way the judge votes. And for some reason, this has become vote no. And that's supposed to be the shorthand for this entire argument. Again, defend the politics dissed, answer whatever they think they've said, ask them to explain their arguments in a way that you can do it. Bottom of the docket is another theory argument. It's just like, oh, our plan passes, but it just gets added to the bottom of the to-do list. Docket's another word for to-do list. Again, defend the politics dissed, answer some of these fiat arguments about how that really screws everything up, because we'll never know when it's going to pass. Theory arguments, very easy. I will say that they are almost always only useful when they are dropped. Magic wand, you got any Alpharetta debaters in here? Oh yeah, Mr. Smiley used to be obsessed with this. We had like a 4-hour argument one day. The debate and the passage of a plan, we should just assume that it's like a fairy. It's just like, and then the plan is in existence. And then the debate should be about the existence of the plan. And debate is not a magic wand, is what the politics dissed would say, but it's like there takes a lot of bumps and bruises to get a plan to pass. And then, so, you know, magic wand versus no magic wand. Haha, it's another argument that basically boils down to you don't get your politics dissed. All of them are theory arguments. If you can defend the right to the politics dissed, the benefits of the politics dissed, and your interpretation of fiat, which should be the app gets to defend the plan, the negative gets any effect of the plan. That's pretty good. Let me talk about the impact debate. Impact debating on the line by line, the 2 and C1 and R when it's not an impact turn. First, we've already talked about the external impact. It should be explained well in the overview section. If they read a bunch of answers on the line by line, you can take some of that overview stuff and put it down on the line by line. I encourage you to do that. You still explain the terminal impact, but if their number 5, the 2AC is like, no impact, this bill doesn't solve it, go ahead and steal a little bit from your overview, take it down there. Access as much as possible. I don't have a whiteboard in this, but I'm a big fan of debate as a scale, and Stephen is as well. And I like to think of it as like, here's the judge, that's the thing, we got advantage 1, advantage 2, over here we've got politics, we've got an external impact. And your job when debating the impact is that the politics dissed solves advantage 1 and the politics dissed solves advantage 2. By doing that, who do those scales always necessarily favor? The neg, because you've tied on everything else and you've got one impact that's external. Haha, much easier for you to win the debate if you access as much of the app as possible. Third, it's difficult on this topic to go for politics versus case. Very, very difficult. Why did I even write that? This is like the last year's topic. I apologize. Bull. There are fantastic cards about the political repercussions of engagement. There are fantastic cards that say that when a plan is unpopular, the engagement actually backfires because it starts us talking poorly about people. There are these cards that are written by Haas that says the problem with engaging someone like Venezuela is that even if we did something positive, the number of people who'd be angry at the waste of money would cause all of these news feeds to start coming up about how much we hate Venezuela. And so all of the good done by the plan is undone by all of the bad negative media coverage. I think it's actually quite easy to talk about the politics dissed in the case. Finally, if it accesses everything and you kick it, it screws up everyone's impact in the debate. If I've done this work over here, where it's like the politics dissed answers everything, it solves all of the impacts in the debate, you've done it properly in the negative block, then kicking the disad is a great way to say the status quo solves some of your advantages. I'll try to do that again. It's kind of a complicated thing. Start thinking about what happens when you kick disads. Okay? Start thinking about what happens when you kick disads. When you concede no impact arguments. When you concede no link arguments. When you concede them, you are not just being like, oh, it goes away. You're making some of those arguments relevant. If you have proven that passage of the immigration bill saves the economy and boosts U.S.-Latin American relations, that argument doesn't just disappear, it's floating out there. And when you kick the disad, haha, the status quo solves some stuff. 2NC, 1NR, 1.5. Impact debate and impact turn. First, whenever anyone impact turn stuff, you should focus on one terminal impact that you can impact that you can terminally impact. So someone's like, immigration's bad for 7 reasons. Don't re-engage with like, no, it's good for 9 reasons. Haha. It's a race to see who can read the most cards on this issue. No, instead it should be about depth and the single impact that you can defend. You should research it. Again, this doesn't change. They have a bunch of impact turns, like just a bunch of scenarios, and you're saying that it's good for hedge. It is a better use of your time to say hegemony solves all of the impacts that they're saying are impact turns. It's better to say economic growth solves all of these than the other way around. Focus on uniqueness for their impact turn. Well, I thought there was one more. And then like most of those impact turns are happening because of other bills, not because of just your bill. Engage in that stuff. That was all kind of complicated. I'm running out of time. I'm going to skip it. 2NR on politics. First and foremost, this is the question you ask yourself before you give all 2NRs. How much of the case do you solve versus how much of the case do they win? If they're winning a lot of their case, then a majority of your time should be spent on impact calculus. If instead they're spending a lot of time on the disad, the weakness of the politics disad is actually usually the link and the internal link, and you would want to spend some time there.
Can you repeat what you just said?
I will with some specifics. If the case is big, focus on the magnitude or the size of the impact. Like, they're winning a lot of their case. All I've got is politics DA. Then a majority of your 2NR time should be spent on the size of the impact of the disad. If you're actually beating a lot of the case, then the impact isn't as necessary winning the risk of the disad is, and then you focus on link and uniqueness. It's the most important 2NR question. You have to be honest with yourself. If at any point you are still saying the phrase, we win 100% or they don't win any, then you are a liar and you are not debating. Unless they've conceded, and then who cares? We're not practicing for those debates. If you've played your cards right, you should be okay on the impact because you're reading a bunch of impact cards in the overview. You're putting pressure on the 1AR to answer that stuff. You should be fine. The uniqueness debate, you should have written out for the 2NR before the debate. Instead of every single time you extend the politics disad saying, oh, I need to extend uniqueness, let me read our cards. Prior to the first time you extend the politics disad, you should get a block out. You should say, 2NR uniqueness wall. It should be something along the lines of, immigration is going to pass now. We've got multiple cards on this. Card 1, card 2, card 3. The less you use the phrase political capital, and the more you use the warrants for why the president's influence is key, the better you will be at the politics disad. It's like, oh, it's political capital is key. Haha. That's not a valuable phrase. If instead you can fill it in with stuff like, his influence is key to keeping moderate Republicans from splitting and going more Republican and less moderate, then that's a much better argument. That one doesn't sound made up. Political capital is a useful phrase that's become popular in the media to define the way the president uses his influence. The better you are at explaining what that specific influence is, you're good. Finally, think about it in a macro world. You don't have to have evidence to tell me why you would prefer immigration bill to pass Congress than you would for us to lift an embargo on Cuba. You can think of all of the ways the immigration bill would benefit Cuba. all of the ways that the immigration bill would benefit U.S.-Latin American relations. Begin to think about the actual bill versus the actual act and the way that they compare, and include those in some of your impact calculus stuff. My frequently asked questions, and then I'll take some before I spend like 10 minutes on answering politics disad, were, how do I make politics in the 1R more viable versus big apps? This is always the question that gives, like, oh, I have a lot of trouble with like really big apps. Well, first, start developing the internal turns and accesses the case stuff more. If you are the 1R and you know your job is to debate and extend politics, I think you should write out on a sheet of paper, we solve this advantage, we solve this advantage, we solve this advantage, and read that block somewhere in the 1R on the politics disad. Engage in the game of stealing their impacts for your own. How do you feel about the fact that some people read counterplans and they say, it's less unpopular? I think that's fine. It can be a net benefit. So if the plan is unpopular and the counterplan is both unpopular, you can make the debate about, erring to the one that's less unpopular. You're obviously playing a risky game here with like lowering the overall risk of the disad. I also think that politics doesn't make the best net benefit to a counterplan, because teams tend to overcover it. It is the disad du jour. Everyone reads it and loves it. If I'm a 2A, I'm putting a ton of answers on it every round. That being said, if you can say that the more unpopular it is, the bigger the risk of the disad is, but prefer the counterplan to the plan, that's okay. Should you go for it with case or not? Yes. You would like practice debating, and you want to see what a majority of the outrounds are at the NDCA tournament. There are politics in the 1R and case in the 2NC. It's probably the most popular choice of arguments that you will hear. You need to get ready to debate it, and more importantly, ready to answer it. Did I have any other questions about the politics disad quickly? Yeah.
You said politics 1R, case in what?
Case 2 and C.
Okay.
I'm going to start with the important speech, the 2AR. Hopefully, if you were the 2AR, you have read all of the cards up until then. 2ARs, you should be spending 1AR prep time reading negative evidence on the disad that they're going for. In this instance, politics. The more cards you have read as the 2A, the better your speech is going to be. Figuring out where they are the weakest. Second, you should have specific link turns about your app that you are ready to talk to at any time and all the time. Why is your plan popular? Who is it popular with? Why does that level of popularity matter? And you should also start thinking about what does it mean if the plan is popular for the risk of the disad. How does it lower the risk of politics? A good rule of thumb we used to have is you need 4 reasons, totally separate, that the plan is popular before you start debating. That's a great 2AR. Just like at any point, you can just be like, oh yeah, by the way, our plan is popular. This also favors the app because you get to debate your app every time. They get to debate your app every once in a while. Third, impact defense. I want to make 2 separate categories of this for the politics disad. Category 1, you should answer the terminal impact to any politics disad. But that's just true of all DAs. You should answer the terminal impact. You don't want them to get away with extinction if we just pass this bill. But piece of point, you should indict that the bill is not nearly as good as the negative thinks it is. There is nothing Congress could do that would save the world. They're going to argue about it. It's going to get watered down. It's really all not that important. This is impact defense to the bill itself. Usually the best cards about politics disad are written by lobbyists who have a reason to lie and exaggerate because they're trying to get a bill passed. So the Heritage Foundation, which fights for legislation on Congress, writes really good cards that a particular bill is good. Oh, really? Shock. That really surprises me that they would write overwhelmingly in favor of cards, aka do their job. 4, can I decrease the risk of the uniqueness? Remember, if the negative's smart, they have chosen the disad based on uniqueness, which means you're not usually going to be able to win a lot of uniqueness. Sometimes teams are stubborn, or uniqueness is not very good, and you like your affirmative cards. You make a decision. Don't just extend arguments in the 2AR for fun. Instead, you should, if you think you can decrease the risk of uniqueness, then spend some time on it and talk about what it means to lower the vote count. You know, it's like, don't let the negative get away with like 51 is just as good as 55, so it doesn't really matter if they're pressing us on the link if you think we win it more than them. Instead, talk about how each uniqueness card is a view of the world that might be accurate. It lowers the probability of the disad well below 100%. The bill may or may not pass. We have 5 authors who all think it's not going to pass. You should envision a world where each of them is correct. And in each of those worlds, there is 0 risk of the disad. 5, I don't know why I use the word schizophrenic here. 2ARs should be really small. They should be very focused. The smaller the 2AR, the higher the probability of success. The best compliment you can give is when a judge is like, man, I kind of thought, despite voting for you, you may not have gone for enough. It's like, cha-ching, you've done your job. 6, you will be behind on uniqueness and impact debate against good politics teams. The 2 places you should be ahead are on the link debate and on the internal link debate, i.e. the place that says that capital necessary trades off. So uniqueness and impact debate, the negative will be ahead of, because they've got to choose the uniqueness and they have the block to develop the impact. The 2 places you should be ahead on, if you're good, is on the quality of the link debate, and then the internal link debate that the bill's not that good, that the political capital's not that key, political capital doesn't finite, it isn't finite, it doesn't trade off between issues, which means that you need to, in the 2AR, realize that and be willing to give debates on your strengths, not theirs. If you're giving 2ARs every time on non-unique, the bill won't pass, you're not giving a very good 2AR. 1ARs. First and foremost, have a strategy for your 1AR. Discuss it with your partner. Hey, what arguments do you want to beat this politics disad? If you are just answering off-case positions in 1AR, just like, oh, I'm just going to do whatever feels natural when I get up there, you're not doing anyone any favors, except for the negative. Instead, just have a conversation. You know, it's like, argue, you're my 2AR. What's your favorite politics answers to go for on the 2A in the 2A? What you like? All of them? That's a terrible answer. Oh, did I hear you say you really like winners win? Oh, me too. I'll make sure I extend that. That's a good idea. We just had a conversation. He didn't contribute to it, where we decided on a strategy argument that I'm going to extend. Do I want to straight turn the politics disad? This becomes far better if there are a bunch of off-case positions. Like, let's say the block is really dumb and they're like a critique, a counterplan, case, politics, and another disad. You start to want to ask yourself the 1AR, wait a minute, maybe I only want to extend non-uniqueness and those link turns. Maybe I only want to do the impact turns in this speech. Let's really force this 2NR to have to make a choice they don't want to. Am I extending impact defense to everything? If you are not, you are dumb. You're being dumb. You're all brilliant. I've told everyone to put a bunch of big impact stuff in the overview to their politics disad. Do you think as a 1AR you should answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Half of you are not going to, which means the negative's going to win a bunch of debates. Yeah.
Oh, so like if they put in new impact cards for the overview, would it be acceptable to read new cards in the 1AR?
Yes.
Alright.
2NCs are constructive. They can read new arguments on anything they want to. Should you answer them? Yes. You're rebutting. 2. After the 1AR has a strategy, after the 1AR has assured themselves they have impact defense to everything, they should extend lots of stuff. Don't be one of those 1ARs that's like, we have 2 answers of the politics disad in the 1AR. That's what we call a gift to the 2NR. Things to consider. while answering politics in the 1AR. Is there value to arguing uniqueness overwhelms the link? Yes. If the negative has read a card that says something along the lines of passage is guaranteed for blank, and blank is a reason not tied to the presidency, then they have read a piece of evidence that says passage will happen no matter what. A lot of people are silly. One of the reasons immigration is going to pass right now, even though it may or may not, is because the Republicans got shellacked by the Hispanic vote in the most recent election. Just destroyed. And a lot of leaders of the Republican Party came out and said, we've got to do something. We can't just keep losing like 72% of every Hispanic voter in this country and expect to win elections. So they're really good cards. They're like, it will pass, because they're afraid of losing all of the elections from here until infinity because of Hispanic voters. Can the plan change that thinking? No. That is a uniqueness argument that overwhelms the link argument. Second, conceding that is not a uniqueness argument, though. It's actually just a link answer. The key part to that is the uniqueness is so strong that the link is irrelevant. If you do it and then concede the link debate, that the plan is ridiculously unpopular, that it would cost tons of capital, that the president's capital is key in multiple pieces of evidence, you've not accomplished anything. Uniqueness overwhelms the link is only an answer to the link. The number of times where 1AR is like, we'll concede uniqueness, we are not mentioning the link, haha, no disad, we gotcha. No, it's just a link answer. I would never, ever, ever concede uniqueness overwhelms the link in the 2AC. It allows the negative to just read a ton of new link cards, which is what it is. The 1AR is not a bad place to do it. Are your non-uniques related to the link argument? Do you have a non-uniqueness argument that is related to Obama's capital, that his influence isn't key? Then that's another instance in which I would do this. Does anyone know what sandbagging means?
Just to throw out a bunch of arguments and hope they don't answer them all.
In debate parlance, it actually refers to saving it for a little later. Like if you have really good cards on something, some teams will save them and read all those really good cards in the 1AR. Like let's say just before the tournament you cut a card that's just like, U.S. economic growth is dead. 20 reasons. And you read this card and you're like, oh my God. Instead of saving it for the 2AC, the 2AC reads a card that's like, U.S. economic growth, not that good. They blow it off in the 1AR. You're like, here's more evidence to support that argument. Boom. Start thinking about ways that you can make sure that uniqueness evidence, and that's borderline unethical and all sorts of stuff like that. And I'm not going into that discussion, but what is valuable is making sure that you have good uniqueness cards to read in the 1AR. Read cards in the 1AR. If you don't read at least 2 cards in the 1AR, you're not a very good 1AR. If you don't read at least 2 cards in the 1AR, you're not a very good 1AR. I judged the semis of the high school NDCA tournament. It was a pace team, but it was this Victor guy who's been on a very good team. But
Victor Skindani.
Jordan is part. Who's the guy who debated with Victor at NDCA? What's this young man's name?
Oh.
Do we know? He's a rising senior
I
at
used
Pace
to know
Academy.
his name.
Anyone? Anyone?
I know what you're talking about.
He's an NDCA champion. He's returning. This is who you all have to beat. And he was like, I'm really nervous. I've never given a 1AR. And he gave this 1AR versus, you know, Carrollton Sacred Heart, one of the best teams in the country in this prelim, and then did it again in the semis, where he's just like, I think he read 20 cards in the 1AR. And it's just like, 2AC, non-unique. Our card's really good, their card's okay, here's some more. I would have given him like a 27 speaker points in this 1AR, because he didn't do anything very good. But he did win both of those debates because of what he did do, which is read evidence and develop arguments and make the 2NR really, really hard. Nay, impossible in one instance. Read cards in the 1AR. 27's unfair. I would have given him much better points than that. He was fantastic. He said he was nervous. Victor was like, hey, dude, we need to win these arguments. Just read more cards on them. 4, if you are straight turning, uniqueness, focusing on warrants for why it won't pass, extend multiple link turns, and explain your specific scenario, the specific way in which the plan would cause the immigration bill to pass. When you are straight turning something, it means that you are not extending any defense, and you are basically saying this is a new advantage to the aft, and you should explain it as such. If you are not straight turning, here's what oh man, I didn't mean to curse there. If you are not straight turning, impact defense, internal link defense, specific link turns, a few theory arguments, focus on quality, and then focus on lots of other things.
Wait, can you go back? I couldn't see.
No.
Oh no.
Oh no, GG.
Stop saying that.
No.
Impact
Jesus.
defense, internal link defense, bill sucks. Specific link turns about your argument, a few theory arguments, quality, and then making the 2 in our top. Okay, I'm not going back.
Oh.
I will say, my favorite apt answer to the politics dissed is winners win. Winners win. What?
After multiple link defense, what was it? That wasn't the first thing
I don't remember. I'm sure someone got me fill it out.
You theory.
Winners win, people. The gold standard of politics app answers. It is an argument that says the internal link is backwards and the plan, if it is unpopular, is a good thing. It takes all of the rest of the politics dissed and says, it's good the plan's unpopular. It's good that the plan costs capital because spending capital is the best way to build more. Familiarize yourself with it, develop it. It is the gold standard. I think the 2AC, remember all 2ACs, one of your first goals is to screw with negative block. Reading a lot of answers, you do that with a great variety. Never read 2 cards and make the same argument. Make theory arguments to answer all positions, not just politics, because they're no loss propositions hurt the other team. You should, as a 2AC, you should start pulling impact defense to all impact scenarios that are read. Have a separate file open on your computer that is impact defense. Whatever the 1NC reads, throw out a card that says that impact's not that bad. Read internal link takeouts, even if they're not evidence. It's usually the weakest part of the dissad. The problem with debate and people who are young at it is that they think, oh, I'd like to answer this part of the dissad, but I don't have evidence. You don't need evidence to point out that the dissad sucks. Feel free to sandbag good uniqueness cards. If you have a bunch of them, instead of reading all 5 of them in the 2AC, it is perfectly acceptable to read 1 of them in the 2AC and then 4 more that say the same thing in the 1AR. The debate should develop horizontally across multiple speeches, not vertically within one speech. So think of the flow. It doesn't need to develop here. You read 1 and then develop more later in the 1AR. Link uniqueness in the 2AC, regardless of the dissad. These are cards like Obama has no capital, fights are coming now, thumpers, which are arguments that say that the link will be triggered in the future. Oh, well, thumpers. Things 2AC, winners win, link turn. Always, 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 always. You should have 1 card that say winners win because it answers the entire theory of the politics dissad, which is based on winners lose. It says losing capital is good. You can win a debate on winners win alone. Jason Scalos, for those of you who are in his lab, he and his partner won, I believe, 7 different rounds only on winners win. And I mean, we're not going for our app anymore. We're only going for winners win. Multiple link turns specific to the app, if you can include them. Reasons why the app is popular. Link uniqueness, oh, that was repetitive. Bumpers, other strategic. Impact turns to the bill, if you can research theory arguments. Oh, president's not involved, that's an argument that I haven't said. A lot of politics just had lack a good warrant for why the president's not involved in the writing of the bill. Someone may tie Obama to the immigration bill, but they don't actually have a card that says that the president is involved in the writing or the strategizing the bill. Capital doesn't trade off. This is probably the Ed Lee and John Turner favorites of all favorites. Just like, you've got a card that says the plan costs political capital. You've got a card that says he needs political capital to immigration. Do you have anything that says that pool of capital is the same? It seems to me like the people he needs to convince on immigration are very different from the people he would need to convince on the plan. Where's the card that says that immigration controversies affect engagement with Latin America? If politics is a net benefit to the counter plan, make sure you make answers to the difference. And be willing to call all, if politics and a counter plan are in the 1NC, regardless of what the counter plan is, at some point in the 2AC, you need to call the counter plan unpopular. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's the state's counter plan. I don't care if it's the China will do the act counter plan. Causes a fight in Congress. Be prepared to look through back files for some old counter plans, make analytical arguments for stuff. Researching politics, there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, good. Later. Just kidding. It's well into lunchtime now. I'll post this online. You all can look through it. It's just sort of like my 7 tips for how to research.
Oh wait.
Other questions before we go? Yeah.
So instead of being like sandbagging uniqueness, could you also sandbag like?
Oh.
Or could you?
Great question.
Instead of sandbagging uniqueness, could you sandbag link terms or
Yes.
winner win?
Yeah, there were 2 separate references to sandbagging. There's sandbagging uniqueness with uniqueness evidence, sandbagging arguments horizontally, not vertically, regardless of
I
the
just
argument.
wanted to.
Yes.
How do I stop this thing?
Just hit the button in the middle.
Okay.